I wanted to talk a little bit about uh, diet. We did diet um, and eating and the importance of it for neurofeedback this weekend. Um, and those of you who come to Lunch and Learn just wanted to share a little bit of that, not the whole thing, obviously, because it was an all day presentation, but just kind of some of the uh, key points about the population that's coming into your office, just so you can keep it in mind. One of the most important things in COVID times is to have a good diet and be sleeping well. Those are two of the key things. Also important to exercise, and there's lots of discussion on that on the different news feeds. But in neurofeedback, we've got kind of a conundrum. We've got, as we talked about, the confounds to successful outcomes, and these are the key ones here. Ongoing unidentified family or work trauma and the relationships associated with that. Some clinicians don't always look into that deeply enough, and that can kind of catch them off guard. Lack of physical exercise is another key issue. And that's bigger than a lot of people admit. A lot of people aren't exercising as much as they need to or feel they can't. And that's absolutely one of the most critical things you can do for your health and for your sleep. And then we have impoverished sleep, which we know is the other huge problem, and maybe a bigger problem than, way bigger problem than all of us realize as the research continues to come out on what sleep is related to and how much it interferes with everything when you're not sleeping well. And then inadequate diet, which is also profoundly critical and really invisible to a lot of people. It's amazing how much people don't know about diet in this country, in spite of all the stuff that's on the news. The consequences of the inadequate diet, though, leads to kind of a tautological dilemma, and that is that leads to poor general physical health. Your brain's not getting enough minerals, and it's not producing enough enzymes it needs to produce and amino acids to function properly. And inadequate diet leads to poor sleep, and poor sleep leads to all these other problems. So, plus it affects diet. It makes people overeat the wrong kind of things. Not sleeping enough tends to make people crave sugars and unhealthy carbs, which then leads to more bad sleep and microbiome dysregulation. So we get kind of into a problem there. And then that can lead to inability to exercise if you don't have the energy. And then inadequate diet can lead to depression, literally, and anxiety. So these are all key important things. And but our big problem is here. And we talk about this, but I thought I would just really bring it to everybody's attention again, that this is the typical American profile. These are the clients coming into your office, and these people are all at very high risk for COVID. So obesity rates at 40% and overweight's at 70. Well, just obesity alone, that means 40% of the population is at high risk. Pre-diabetic and diabetic is at 40% because type 1 is 10 and type 2 is around 30% incidence in the population. So you start putting these numbers together and you can see what you're up against when people are coming into your office. Dysbiosis, 70%. Dysbiosis can lead to anxiety, depression, poor attention, and type 2 diabetes. And it correlates heavily with being overweight. Chronic disease, 60%. Again, this goes back to being overweight and having blood sugar problems and not sleeping well. Then high cholesterol is 40%. And the percentage of Americans who are very deficient in at least one or more vitamins is 90%. So if somebody comes in the office and you can just get them to eat more green leafy vegetables, cut back on the sugar and the carbs, do a little bit of exercise and take a few supplements, they'll have a massive effect on their brain and on their sleep and on their energy reserves for exercise. And that's what we talked about this weekend, all of the ways that we could solve this problem. But here's the standard American diet. 11 million Americans die annually from a bad diet. Compare that to how many are dying of COVID. We're talking 200,000. We're talking 11 million die annually. That's an epidemic, an American epidemic. The number one cause is lack of fruits and vegetables. And part of what we did in the presentation is to go over all of the information from the different health organizations in the country and the federal government and show exactly where those deficits are. And just as Mark Hyman says in Food Fix, it is fruits and vegetables. That is our huge problem. 10% of processed food, every 10% of processed food leads to a 14% increase in poor health. So the more that you eat from the center aisles of the grocery store, the more you get frozen meals and the more you go to the fast food, the more increase you guarantee in terms of poor health. And obesity rates have tripled since 1970. And I remember because in the late 60s, that's just when Stouffer's and the other companies were getting started, because I know my parents were in the putting together a company like Stouffer's back then, and there was no competition. It was just starting in the like 66, 67, and the obesity rates have tripled since then. The cost of chronic illness in 2016 alone was 1.1 trillion. 1 in 4 teenagers is type 2 diabetic or pre-diabetic. So think about that. When the kids that come into your office, they're more likely than in the general population. So that's at least 1 out of every 4 or more are pre-diabetic. 1 in 5 has high cholesterol. So look at the kids. Are they overweight? You know, what's their body weight index? How's that looking? What's their diet like? Ask the parents, what are they eating? And 1 in 5 is obese. 30 million kids eat school meals daily, and they have access to junk food vending machines. And government programs were developed to make sure that those vending machines in the schools had good lunch, but the food lobby, which is bigger than the oil lobby, which is one of the biggest lobbies in the world, got in there. And now the Healthy Hunger Free Act allows waffles, and those are white flour waffles made with glyphosate, syrup made with corn syrup with glyphosate, tater tots, pepperoni pizza, plenty of glyphosate in there, chicken nuggets, funnel cakes, chocolate muffins, slush puppies, and chocolate milk. So those are everywhere in the school program. So the kids that are coming into your office, they're getting this in school a lot of times. And a lot of times their parents don't even know how much. Because I had kids, these kids, there's a black market in school lunch food in all these schools. And believe me, these kids trade out constantly. The USDA Smart Snacks policy, supposedly another great program, went from producing really good food to allowing nacho cheese and Cool Rancho Doritos, right? Now, that's a really high quality food. Flamin', that's wrong, I gotta say that. Flamin' Hot Cheetos, oatmeal raisin breakfast cookies, top of the morning to you. Low-fat chocolate milk, whole grain goldfish crackers, sounds like a good basic meal for lunch, and fruit roll-ups for dessert. This is the kind of food that the kids coming into your office are getting, whether you know it or not. These are the facts, what the majority of them are doing. The World Health Organization recommends a maximum of 4 teaspoons of sugar daily. So look at what's in fruit juice. 8 teaspoons, right there, double it. juice in the morning. Cookies, 2 teaspoons. Have 3 cookies, you're at 6, you're over the line. Fruit Loops, 3 teaspoons. Not too bad, but anything else and you're in trouble. Goldfish serving, 3 teaspoons. Chocolate milk, 8 teaspoons. Well, I'm going to have goldfish and chocolate milk for luncheon. Ooh, I'm at 12. That's 3 times. Snickers, well, hopefully not getting too much of those in school. And ice cream, 3 teaspoons. Okay. Added sugar is hiding in 74% of packaged food. So even if you limit yourself carefully on these, and the parents are saying, okay, you get 1 cookie. If they got chocolate milk, they're already in trouble. But if they get 1 cookie or 2, they're in there. But all the food they have is probably going to be having sugar too. So they're going to be over the line. So why is this a concern? Well, this is the sugar consumption rate. And this is the USDA graph here from 1820 to present. And I mean, just look at 1960 to present. I mean, that's stunning. And the companies put sugar in grams on the packages because they know most Americans can't read grams and they don't know how to do the conversion. But 4 grams equals a teaspoon. And so if you start doing the conversion, Cap'n Crunch cereal, give my kid a good bowl of Cap'n Crunch and milk, get him out the door. That's 16 grams. It's 4 times as much as he should have. Fruit roll-ups for lunch, 39 grams. Hey, let's do a healthy peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Well, when you're using the jelly and the peanut butter they have now, you're talking about 35 grams of sugar for your peanut butter and jelly. Let's have some healthy fruit with that. So we can add in another 8. That's 43 grams. Where are we now? 10 times the amount of sugar we should have. Yogurt and fruit, 47 grams. Applesauce, 36 grams. Let's have a healthy applesauce dessert along with our PB&J and our juice. Mac and cheese, 21 grams, 3 times. Well, heck, I'll put mac and cheese in with a fast food mac and cheese in there. At least it's got cheese in it, you know. Sorry, it's 21 grams. Oatmeal, 9 grams. Pop-Tarts, I thought those were bad. That's what we had as kids for lunch, for breakfast. Pop-Tarts, you know, and some tea or coffee or whatever. And out the door to junior high school or high school. 14 grams. I mean, that's amazing. Good thing I didn't have yogurt and fruit back then. Didn't like yogurt when I was a kid at that time. Corn dogs, 7. Oreo cookies, 10. That's stunning. Here's the annual soft drink production in the United States from, you know, just looking at from the 60s and the 50s. In the 50s when they gave us those little bottles to now. I mean, it's massive. Everybody's having too much, and here's our food label. The classic ones here down on the left. See, they put everything in capital letters, squeeze it down, and put it together because they know, and this is not a conspiracy theory, this is from their own boardrooms, it's documented. They know, they admitted that this is what prevents people from wanting to read the labels. It's so hard and so hard to see, and there's so many words they don't understand that people don't bother. And everything's in grams, and most Americans don't know how to do grams. So they lie on purpose, and you have to understand. It's well documented. Do the research. I have. Reading Mark Hyman's Food Fix. It's a good beginning place. And this is what you're up against. And the problem is once you have that much sugar, and you start getting candida and all kinds of specialized bacteria in your microbiome, you start craving sugar. And this is from some little known scientific, it's called Scientific American. It's in the corner of the store somewhere. How gut bacteria tell their hosts what to eat. So this is just looking at the research. You know, once it gets to Scientific America, it's in the street. But we've known this for about 8 or 10 years. Once that gut bacteria get this way, you crave sugar, and kids go crazy for it. They will sneak it, they will hide it, they will steal it, and adults are just as bad. And it goes right up the vagal pathways into the brain and hits the craving centers. And just to make sure that the shell game is complete, these are all the names they use for sugar in these crazy labels they put out because they want to make sure that you don't know too much about what's going on. Sugar industry knows this is addicting. It is very addicting, and that makes it easy to sell food. Here's the average score, median score of over 700 clinics from NewMind clinics using NewMind software. We know the mean score for the is 77, and not much of a count here. I only took 63,138 people. How many pieces of research do you know have n sizes that big?
Richard, quick
Yes.
question, Martin here. You know my love for statistics, so I have a heretic question. Mean score of what?
The mean score for overall for the physiology. In other words, the physiology has a score. It could be where it adds up.
Yeah. Okay. So it's a higher number means a lousier physiology, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Once you get up to 2 standard deviations, so standard deviation is 74. So once you're up around 150, which is what Rob and I were eyeballing before I ran the statistics, and then we actually ran the statistics and like, wow, that was pretty close eyeballing. Once you're over 150, you're getting into that you're past 1 standard deviation, getting into that 2 standard deviation range. What's my confidence level? I challenge you to find anybody who has this much data from this many clinics around the country with this carefully constructed statistical assessment. Here's a typical stress profile, 46. See, the median is 53. Because we have people with some extreme scores, the median's a safer score to go with. So I just show somebody with a median of 46 I could get my hands on. It's around 53. And you can see here, this is a kind of a typical profile you would see on your physiology. And here, this gastrointestinal, it's still at minimal, but it's getting close. Once they get up to 11 or 12, you start getting into low. And that's important to know, because once you get into low, you're starting to get into some trouble physiologically. And here's sleep. You're going to see pituitary up here a lot because sleep is one of the key things, as Martin and I never get tired of telling you. It's one of the most critical factors involved in all of this, and it's one of the first things to go. And that's why you so often see pituitary at top. That really means sleep. Your hypothalamic pituitary axis is off, and once that goes off, sleep goes off. Once that goes off, everything starts going south. Everything. And here's that map. So you can see this person has some pretty low alpha and theta. So that's a person who's very stressed out and actually anxious. And how do I know that person's anxious? Because they have lower than average theta. Let me see if I can bring that up for you real quick. Where is that it? There we go. Last 2 weeks I've been running data. Here we have 2 t-tests to sample, looking for significant difference between people with anxiety scores greater than 20 and people with anxiety scores less than 10, which would put these people in kind of the 2 extremes of anxiety. And that anxiety scores are from the ISI, Interactive Self-Inventory Test from NewMind. And when we look at this, we find a significant difference. I mean, it's so significant, it's E-0.05. That means there's like 5 zeros in front of this 3. That's how significant it is. It's way beyond 0.001. So profoundly significant difference in theta between people who are anxious and not anxious. And I was surprised this was not anything I expected. I just kind of ran this because I was running delta and everything else. I said, well, heck, I'll just run theta. I'll take, half an hour and run the stats since I'm already in here digging around. And that was a real surprise, and I thought I'd share it with you. That on average, the more anxious people are, the less theta they had. But I thought that would delight Martin, um, since he's a proponent of alpha theta and getting people calm. Because
Yeah, it's also clear why they have lower theta
Mhm.
functionally, but let's not go into these details.
Well, it's something
We
that we can talk about in more detail, Martin. And
Yes.
but very interesting, isn't it? It's a very
Yeah, it's actually not surprising,
No,
really.
it's not. Because when I thought about it, I was like, oh, that makes perfect sense, actually. But for many reasons, but we can get into that more if we have time. But you can see that their anxiety is up. So of course, their theta is lower than average. They have quite a bit of a beta asymmetry, but they're also starting to get an alpha asymmetry and alpha slowing, and that which is kind of unusual because we don't see that alpha slowing typically until people get much higher health problems. So um, it's more complicated than it looks. So here's our incidence of major issues. And what it turns out when we ran the data is that if you're scoring over one standard deviation, in other words, if you're getting a significant score on the New Mind Physio, that's a very strong predictor that you actually have a problem, way stronger than I ever thought. And I said that to Susan Blank. She said, oh, no, matches the tests pretty good. I thought, well, it's one clinic, but she's right. Incidence of thyroidism is 12%. Digestive problems, serious ones, 12%. Adrenal fatigue is actually closer to 30, but it gets inflated um, because of the different definitions of these things. Pre-diabetics, 30, that's solid with the FDA and National Health Organizations. Liver, 8 to 10. Sleep deficit, 27%. Serious sleep deficit. So if your New Mind score is greater than one standard deviation, in other words, you're getting past, let's look at that. Let's say you're getting past blue and into yellow. If you're at blue, you're already at high risk. By the time you get to yellow, you are likely have a problem. You can almost predict that if they get really good testing, they're going to have a problem. So it turns out that our physiology checklist matches the national averages across all of those problems. So I'm here to tell you that physiology checklist is really valuable, really important, and it's really accurate, way more accurate than I ever thought. Um, so that's a couple of things I just wanted to drop on you is those statistics because I've been running a lot of them. Um, give you an idea of how valuable and accurate the software you're using is, and not making just claims, but actually showing you the sample sizes and the numbers. Um, and and of course, I'm going to write this all up next in this coming year. We'll write up with all the literature and the stats. It'll be a whole book on. It won't be that long because it's technical. Whole book on the statistical analysis of the New Mind database related to all of this stuff. Either supporting or not supporting the existing literature. And I think it'll be interesting for a lot of people. But here it is. And I've shown this before. So this is your clients. This is what they need in terms of nutrition. 68% of them are low in magnesium. They all need probiotics. 50% are low in vitamin D. That makes it at high risk for COVID. The more vitamin D you get and the less overweight you are. I mean, just straight out that. The less sugar, carbs, the more probiotics and vitamin D, the safer you're going to be. And then you need sleep and exercise too. That's one of the ways you can take care of yourself in this time. Omega-3s, 95% are low. And then we have the 50% on vitamin A and C. Vitamin E, 94% of the population is severely low on vitamin E. Calcium and iodine, they're kind of low on. Vitamin Bs, 20%, not as critical. Acetylcholine, 90%. Acetylcholine is critical for white matter. growth and maintenance in the brain. That's the connections between your neurons. And a lot of people are low on minerals. And again, we're not making this up. It comes from a National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey for children and adolescents. So read it and weep. So for your people coming in during COVID, these are some things you can do. Put them on the physiology checklist, get an idea of their body mass index, or at least their weight, eyeball it, ask them how much, what are they getting, they're making their food from whole foods, or are they just doing middle aisle quick meals? And what Mark Hyman says, he said, I've been to some of these families and they're overweight and some of them are obese and they're trying to do all these diets. And he said, they come to me crying, they don't know what to do. And he said, when I go to their houses, because he does house calls for them, he finds out their problem is they don't know how to cook or select food for cooking. And so when he started teaching his obese patients how to cook, they started to dramatically drop their weight, and all of their CBC data, all their blood panels, suddenly started to come way into normal range. So when we're frustrated with our clients and we know a lot of their health problems are coming from diet, this is what we can do, but we have to identify them, where are they buying their food from? Are they cooking in the kitchen? Or are they just doing fast food? Do they look overweight to you? That's a time to ask questions. People don't get overweight by magic. Now, there's a very small percentage that might have a thyroid issue, but a lot of those people who have thyroid issue got there because of excess lipopolysaccharides from leaky gut, weight issue, and eating crappy food. All of this affects the brain and gets in the way of your neurofeedback and prevents you from doing good neurofeedback. Okay, so that's just a little brief bit of what we covered in our whole presentation. I went in much more into all the details in terms of physiology, enzyme production, a lot more into leaky gut and brain physiology. And Barbara went much more heavily into food values, and into how to make food from scratch. And presented a model and how you could learn to cook quite easily and pretty quickly how to make food pretty fast. But you do have to get good food. Here's average mineral content of vegetables since 1914 to 1997. Our food is not as good as the people eating food back in World War II or even the 50s. That's why you really have to get organic, and it's too expensive for people. But the other thing you can do is buy local. A lot of the farmers, a large percentage of them, grow organic food. They don't have the money to get the government certification, but they're growing it, and that's a good thing to do. But one of the other things that I found with our family and with other families I've worked with is that if you get your kids to help you cook during dinner, and instead of having them watch TV or saying, go do your homework, if you actually get them to help you cook and cut and stir and taste, they will start eating more of the foods and more of the healthy foods. If you just serve it, it's not going to happen. But if they're cutting and cooking and tasting, it's amazing what happens, because, as Barbara said, you have to taste something 5 to 7 times before you really know whether you like it or not. That's in the research. So just some of the ways that we can deal with this. So that's my presentation on that. And see if anybody had any comments or ideas or theories, or I just bring that up. Frustrations with your clients. I tell them this, but they don't do anything. How can I monitor them?
I would say yes, yes, and yes to those questions. I cannot even remember the last time somebody had a physiology score as low as 46.
But
Honestly,
when you look at, I know it's hard to believe, but that's because of the population coming to your clinic. And when you
right.
see that, you know that they're not eating right. It's not magic. It's not a mystery. It's that they're not eating right. Um, and and that's because the food industry had paid the people at Harvard millions of dollars to control what was published back in the 50s and 60s. I mean, that's not conspiracy theory. It's profoundly well documented. There were government reviews on it. There were Senate and congressional reviews on it years ago. They literally misinformed the public on purpose. And the sugar, was it Diamond Sugar, I think at the time? They were one of the key players in that. I mean, when you read the history, it's stunning that they do it. But they've been doing it since then. And the poor public's misinformed. They were told to eat more carbs and not eat fat. That was a complete lie, complete misrepresentation of the data. It's the other way around. Eat healthy fats, not Crisco and the bad palm oil and uh, corn oil with glyphosate, but healthy fat, like olive oil. Um, Eat the healthy fats, avocado oil, and feel free. Bacon's fine if it's organic bacon, not glyphosate bacon. Um, but be reasonable. Butter's good. Just don't eat massive amounts of it. I mean, your body needs fat. Um, Eat all carbs, pasta and stuff like that, bread. You're going to get overweight. Your blood sugar going to A1C is going to be terrible. Triglycerides are going to be high. You're going to be overweight, and it's going to affect your brain and your sleep.
Which probiotics do you recommend? I mean, not company-wise, but there's so
There's
many.
there's so many out there, and Garden of Life is the one that worked with a lot of the leading experts early on, like Perlmutter. He hooked up with them. Garden of Life. It's relatively inexpensive compared to. I mean, you can find better ones supposedly if you go look at the high end sites, but often you have to be a physician to order them. But Garden of Life is one that you don't have to be a physician that has the blessing of Perlmutter, who's one of the leading experts. So um, he's a pretty straight shooter. I don't think he's in it for just the money, but we've used those with a lot of our clients, and they seem to really work pretty good. There's other brands out there, I have no doubt, that are just as good, but that's one I gravitated towards because I'm a kind of a Perlmutter fan.
Richard, this is Melissa.
Yeah,
Hey, I'm really interested in this topic and have been, kind of studying it for years. One
great.
thing I've learned that I really was kind of unaware of, I learned this from my own functional medicine doctor, and that doesn't usually get mentioned, is the importance of prebiotics,
Yeah.
which is different from probiotics. And there's
Mm-hmm.
a lot of food, and I mean, you don't have to buy that. That doesn't have to come in a bottle. There's a lot
Exactly.
of food that serves as prebiotic. You just Google it, and she keeps stressing to me how important that is.
It is. It is. That's the probiotics are mostly for uh, upper GI, and prebiotics are more for the lower GI. But it's critical because lower GI is where a lot of the really important microbiome organisms are grown.
Right. What
Absorption.
I've been told is that the prebiotics provide food
Mm-hmm.
for your gut bacteria.
Yeah,
So
for the
you take a
large
probiotic, you're
intestine.
adding bacteria, you're adding the different
Yes,
species,
you need both.
and the
Right.
prebiotic feeds them.
Yeah, it's tough though with prebiotics, as you say. Oh yeah, prebiotics, beets, and it's what, sauerkraut. People, I don't eat sauerkraut. I don't like beets. Well, we got to find something else. So yeah, you need a list.
Even celery,
Celery
raw
is
celery.
great. Yeah,
There's several things on the list. If you Google it,
but
I've learned to eat
how many?
jicama. I learned to love it.
Yeah, you know how many people don't uh, eat salad? in
Yes.
vegetables, it's profound.
Yeah.
It's profound. You should be eating a salad every day, or some version of that with vegetables, and you should be having a green leafy vegetable every day. It's really critical for your health and your immune function.
Dr. Suter, this is Rodney. Are you familiar with Caldwell Esselstyn? He's a cardiac surgeon,
I am not.
retired.
Tell me about him.
He's 87 years old. He's a got whole food plant diet for protein, for everything. And he talks about the problem when we try to divide out things like minerals or vitamins, or we separate it from its original source. He's been lecturing. He's now on committees with Harvard Medical School, and now he's been accepted back. They rejected him, the American Cardiology Association. He's now on their board of directors. Written a
Wow.
lot of books, but he talks about whole foods a lot. So much so that, like, whole grains, which I was against because of fear of gluten. But my wife and I are trying to switch to that after listening to him and his daughter and his wife and his son. They do regular lectures on YouTube, and he really gets you to think food in its original form, like green leafy vegetables. They're really big into that. And mixing them in, like with whole grain oats for oatmeal in the morning, with fresh organic fruits, fresh organic vegetables. He's really into that. So you and he sound like you're singing from the same prayer book. So he's a fascinating guy. I think you would appreciate him. And I think he's way out there. He was one of the guys that was on the inside in the 80s, and then realized with what he saw was the widowmaker, the narrowing of the ascending arterial vessels on the heart. So many of them, they were putting in stents and giving them medication. He said just wasn't working. People were dying, and he started trying to figure out what it was. And in 1984, he said, "It is the American diet that's killing my patients." And then he has some that he shows on YouTube where he shows the widowmaker, the narrowing in that area, where after 3 months had people that couldn't breathe, couldn't walk up a flight of stairs, had them it might not just be 3 months, it might be 9 months, but where they get full capacity. And he says the key thing is with the natural foods, you get the elements to make nitric oxide, which gives the arterial bodies that breathing, that pulsing, that ability to stretch and flex. It's fascinating. So he sounds just like you.
Well, I'm sure he knows more about it than me if he's been teaching at Harvard, or working there. But I think we don't have to be experts. We just have to know these basic things to share with our patients and our clients. And you can point to him. If you have a list, say, well, check out this guy, or check out Mark Hyman, or check out any one of these people who are the promoter. Go to their site. It's right there. These people are experts, and you say, it's what you need to do, and this is why I'm saying it. Here's your USDA guidelines versus who's eating what. I mean, just like we're saying. So that's why you need bypasses. Look, everybody should be eating 40% more vegetables. I wouldn't say dairy. Some people are sensitive to it, so you might not eat that. But people need more fruit. They need 20% less grains, and maybe 30% less meat. I mean, that's the guideline.
He says even fish, even any kind of meat, anything with a face, he said, don't eat it.
Well, that's pretty extreme, I think,
It is.
And you're not going to get Americans to go in that direction, but you can certainly cut back. And there's a lot of controversy about that. I mean, I was a vegetarian until I had kids, but even then I only ate fish and chicken. I still only eat fish and chicken because I've just read too much bad research about red meat. But you can still eat, I mean, theoretically I could eat red meat in very modest amount, but as you get to be older, you need protein, and meat's a very efficient way to get protein. And so there's a huge There's a huge controversy about meat that's going on, and
Yep.
and the information is pretty heavy on both sides. When it gets like that, I'm kind of with the leading experts who just say, Mediterranean diet is documented to work. It's got all the right components. Meat's fine. Just don't make it the biggest thing of every meal all the time. Grains are
Yep.
fine, but it's better if they're whole and there's not too much of them. Eat all the vegetables you want, and a cup of fruit a day.
One of the things that prompted me to join the discussion just now was that picture of the minerals going so far down.
Yeah,
We
that's a
add
heartbreaker.
we add mineral water to our filtered water. Every 5 gallons, we put in like 16 or 24 ounces of mineral water. It made me think, if you separate it from its joined to a whole food, does it just go straight through the body and you don't get the benefits of it? Like Gerolsteiner, this German mineral water, it's not expensive, but it's got like 2,500 parts per million or something like that on it. Again, it's grams or whatever it is, but it's supposedly it's saturated with minerals. The question is your body able to use it and assimilate it in at the cellular level if it's not joined in a whole plant?
Yeah, that's the question that.
That's a very good question. Can I quickly?
Yes, Martin, please.
Come into it's okay. All right. First of all, take 20 steps back and look at the following. That's how I see things. You might think I'm crazy, but it is very helpful to see where I personally go. So if you swallow anything, this is absolutely what you swallowed is not available for your body. It's in your stomach. Now, you asked the question, I think it's Rodney, right? Is it
Yes.
important in what form a mineral is when I swallow it? I would think yes, very much. Think of it that way. If we talk minerals, we talk atoms and molecules. And this is an extremely small dimension. That's where chemical reactions happens, and that's what your organism needs to pick up in order to keep yourself healthy. So the form in which you swallow minerals is crucially important to end up processed with your microbiomes into food which your organism is evolved to pick up. So yes, most definitely, functionally, we know that from all animal studies we have, and sorry, there is definitely no clue, no shadow of a clue, while a human organism should function different. We know that, yes, the form in which a particular mineral, like for instance magnesium and also, is swallowed is crucial, whether ultimately your intestinal cells are capable to get that mineral into your system, which they don't in simple form as an isolated mineral. It has to be packed somehow.
That's the Martin, thank you for that. I think that's one of the arguments I've read about getting why you eat animal protein, because they've incorporated so much by consuming what they consume, the leafy vegetables, green vegetables, whatever, grasses, etc. They incorporate that into their muscle.
We have, since with the tenfold increase of the global population, we do have a global food problem here. And the problem is soils are depleted. In other words, even if you eat green vegetables or fruit, their mineral content is extremely low recently. If you eat banana produced in Mexico up in New York, they simply don't have the minerals because they're not ripe when they are harvested. We do have a global food problem here. So it's not only that, the processed foods are out. The problem is also that the quality of the fresh veggies is dramatically decreasing. That's why the best possible approach is definitely, I'm completely in line here from the point of view of functional biology with Richard, local farmers. That's the freshest possible food and the ripest possible food we can get. We know, for instance, grapes accumulate probably 60–70% of their mineral content, what makes them actually a good nutrient, a good food, happens in the last 10 to 15 days before they fall off the grape plant, the grapevine, and start to rotten. So if you pick grapes more than 3 weeks prior, you still have a grape. It still looks good. It might even still taste sweet, but it doesn't contain the volume minerals, which would actually be required for an easy digestion. Does that make sense, Rodney?
Yeah, excuse me. Yeah, it does. It does.
Yeah. So the problem we have today, if you go to a supermarket to buy your food, all you get there is, or most of what you get there in terms of fresh veggies isn't ripe. It has been picked and packed and, in many cases, preserved, gassed with nitrogen, so it doesn't rotten on the transport and can be placed in your supermarket for 3–4 days, so people have time to buy them. It's a social problem we have, and the ultimate cause is, of course, overpopulation. And nobody's dealing with that. There is no public health organized public health department in our governments which has any saying in anything. But it will be there. It's not the issue or the duty of medical doctors. It's the duty of public health organizations in governments to start to warn the governments. Something has to be done about this, or it just gets worse. We have 60 million, more than 60 million additional food competitors on that planet since January 1st, net. It's not possible that this does not affect us, and it's scary.
Yeah, we only have 60 harvests left. With the soil, only 60 harvests left on Earth, and we're out of food. Start to run really low.
Well, we already are. I mean, if you count the number of children, 5 who die from hunger, that's a pandemic compared to COVID-19. I mean, COVID-19 is ridiculous. People are born and die because they don't have enough food on this planet, and nobody does anything about it. But anyway,
that was an interesting
that's Martin here.
Yeah, Dr. Suter, that 60 harvest.
That's pretty amazing when you think about it, isn't it?
What do you mean by that? I got a little confused. 60 harvests?
Yeah, the soil erosion is so intense at this point that the international organizations that monitor the soil resources say that we have approximately 60 harvests left, and then our soil is going to be so depleted it's going to be very hard to produce food. I mean, you could do something about it, but there's a lot of greedy people who are not looking at the 60. They're looking at what can I put in my account tomorrow, and who do I have to talk with in power so that I can keep doing what I'm doing.
Yeah, there is another thought, Richard. There is no food growing in New York City, and 17–18 million people have to eat daily.
Yeah.
So there is no other way to feed them than industrial food production. And industrial food production includes industrial raising of cattle, industrial farming.
Oh, wait, Martin, I have to turn you on to some alternatives that have very good, but not today. We don't have time. But there are alternatives that, besides the way we're doing it now, the massive way we're doing it now, there are very powerful alternatives. So they're just not being utilized. But I do agree that we still have to produce at a large level, but there's better ways to do it. And maybe that's something we can discuss another time, because it's 1:01 right now, and I have to go meet with a client. I don't know about you guys.
So we can't live on just nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, which is what they put in the gardens.
We got to eat food. Okay.
Yeah, and we, Rodney, we need to pack the minerals in the right way. So the microbiome, split it up into molecules